century with regard to scapegoating different political, ethnic, and social groups as a way to foment an anger, a sense of empowerment of one group of citizens against another group of citizens because of economic conditions. The vitriol that is being expressed against immigrants, illegal or not, in the United States because of the economic crisis is a form of scapegoating. It's a way of pointing the finger at a group of people to try and create and instigate an anger that's very powerful. When people who write about the immigrants, or Howie Carr on I'm Howie Carr on Boston radio, who talks about all the how the immigrants in Arizona and Sarah Palin is great. These people are purposefully deflecting attention from the issue, the economic issues, the realities of the situation, the fiscal issues on a macroeconomic scale, and are using you, Grace, and you, Jason, for their own ends. Limbaugh and Beck, Jason and Grace, do they have more money than you? Beck, what does he have, a $30 million a year? Or he's a rich man, Grace and Jason, and so is Limbaugh. These are rich men who are able to accumulate their wealth and get listenership and convince you that their political view is correct and get buy-in from you based upon the power of their personality. I don't disagree with their economic analyses. I don't disagree that the amount of debt in the system is unsustainable. I don't disagree that the government, whether it was Barack Obama's administration or George Bush's administration or Bill Clinton's, doesn't matter. Ever since we essentially got off the gold standard in the early 1970s, every administration, left or right, Republican or Democrat, has kicked the can down the road and has used the ability of the government, what did the Senate do yesterday? The Senate passed a $60 billion spending bill for the war to support the surge in Afghanistan. Well, where's that $60 billion going to come from? Well, they print it. They add a few digits to a reserve account at the Federal Reserve. Now, a lot of people would say, well, yeah, it's going to come back and, be taxes. And yes, at some point, that's true. But these guys, Beck and Limbaugh, while they may have a pretty good grasp of the economics and the economic realities that we're facing, the next leap they make is to essentially create a scapegoat of the left and a scapegoat of, in this case, in the case of Arizona, immigrants, illegal or legal. It's not the issue. So I'm against Glenn Beck because I think that he's manipulating you because it's a way for him to make money. I think that he is a dangerous man. I think that his message is a dangerous message. I think that there should be no enemy on the left and there should be no enemy on the right. The enemy is basically, Jason and Grace, our nation's monetary policies. That's the enemy. The enemy is the fact that we as a nation can print money with utter impunity. That we can create this fiat currency and print trillions of dollars as a way to not deal with the reality of the greed that has created trillions and trillions of dollars worth of debt. That's the enemy. The enemy is not ideological. The enemy is the fact that we have a system that is flawed. Fiat currency, irredeemable, has always failed. And Beck and Limbaugh are exploiting you and pointing the finger at a class of Americans as a way to line their pockets and to foment anger based upon the power of their personalities. I think I have time for one more question here. This person didn't send their name. They gave themselves a moniker. Arrowhead from Port Jefferson, New York. Arrowhead asks, Dan, I favor an audit of the Federal Reserve. Where do you stand and why? Arrowhead, I too favor an audit of the Federal Reserve. I think that the Federal Reserve is a quasi-private institution that has the ability to create inflation, to create money, to inflate the money supply. and that we would like to know as citizens of the United States, what's going on here? What's in these reserve accounts? Is the European Central Bank and the IMF, how much money are these folks getting? How is this going to impact me and my ability to afford on my salary energy and food down the road based upon cost inflation? However, I want to point something out, Arrowhead, because here's what happens when you get on those conservative blogs and you point out like just an idea. Say, hey, I'm going to throw this idea out. All of a sudden, whether, again, oftentimes it's conservatives. And I'm not saying it's conservatives all the time. It's the right and the left, the extremes. And I'm angry at them because they can't have a conversation, because they're so narrow-minded, right and left. Here's a question for you, Arrowhead. What if an audit of the Federal Reserve, a true audit, exposed information about what's been happening over the last 10, 20 years with regard to spending and the pumping of money into these accounts and accounts that we were never told about, etc.? What if it so destroyed trust and confidence in the monetary system that we currently have that a huge number of Americans came to the belief that, hey, we no longer need to accumulate these dollars in order to pay taxes because we're getting ripped off so left, right, and center that there's no reason for us to accumulate dollars. You see, the dollar only has value, Arrowhead, because people think they need the dollar to pay their taxes. If enough Americans came to believe that they no longer needed to accumulate dollars in order to pay their taxes, in order to service their tax bill, the dollar would immediately have no value. That's the only reason it has value, is because Americans believe they need those dollars to pay their property taxes, sales tax, whatever. Federal taxes, income tax, FICA, you name it. So I throw this question out to you, Arrowhead. Yes, I support an audit of the Federal Reserve because in this case, I think that the truth is a heck of a lot more important than... I think that in this case, if we continue to obfuscate and we continue to lie and we continue to kick the can down the road, we're going to wake up in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years and we're going to have a cataclysmic collapse. Yes, I believe that we're in a depression right now, but I'm talking about a cataclysmic stoppage of the global economy. However, I'm willing to entertain the conversation, and I think members of our political body are too in Congress, who may also believe that an audit of the Fed is a good idea, that exposing that information to the public all at once could have a extraordinarily cataclysmic impact upon the global economy. It's an interesting question. As you know, I know a lot of policymakers, and as you know, Arrowhead, policymakers begin at the end and they work their way back. They begin with, this is where we want to get to, and they work their way back. Well, if you say to a policymaker, where do you want the economy to be? Where do you want the state of the social fabric of the nation to be in 5 years? They're going to say, we want there to be this much employment and social stability and the ability for energy to be distributed, no rolling blackouts. So they begin with a at the end and work their way back. And as you work your way back and you say, okay, how does an audit of the Fed play into all of those ideas of stability? A lot of politicians, whether they be on the left or the right, are afraid that if there was an audit of the Fed and information were exposed that were too inflammatory, that end that they're seeking, higher employment numbers, social stability, political stability, freedom or safety from terrorism, national security being at a premium, that those issues would be mitigated. And so I'm willing to entertain the conversation that in the short term, an audit of the Federal Reserve, a full audit, is not necessarily in the best interest of the nation. I'm willing to have that conversation. But you know what? People way out on the right and people way out on the left, they refuse to have that conversation because they're stuck in their ways. And they won't have an intellectual conversation because they are ideologues and they follow ideologues. Out on the right, they follow ideologues like Beck and Limbaugh. Out on I don't know who they follow out on the left these days, but they're not willing to have the conversation, and that's why I'm angry. I'm a moderate, and I'm angry. And I want you to understand, out there in cable access TV land, what exactly is happening with the economy, and what are the operational truths, the realities, the financial and fiscal realities, irrespective of ideology. So you can email me your questions, diw1962 @yahoo.com, and I'm happy to answer them. I think I have time for one more question, unless someone comes out and gives me the cut, and I think that I'm getting the cut. So anyway, thanks for listening, and that's all about all I have to say. The Angry Moderate signing off. Adios.